June 9th, 2022. A quiet Illinois neighborhood. A mother walks up the stairs to check on her daughter, who hasn't answered her calls in over 15 hours. She unlocks the door, and what she finds inside is so horrifying. First responders would describe it as one of the most brutal crime scenes they had ever witnessed. Her 22-year-old daughter, 8 months pregnant, was lying motionless, and what was missing from her body would leave investigators shaken to their core. Tonight, we're unraveling the full story. The victim's life, the night of terror, the desperate investigation, and the chilling truth behind one of Illinois' most disturbing cases. If you want us to keep covering cases like this, make sure to hit the like button and let us know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Let's dive right into the story. June 9th, 2022. The summer sun baked down on the quiet streets of Alton, Illinois, a working-class river town just outside St. Louis. It was an ordinary Thursday afternoon, ordinary for everyone except one mother whose worry was growing into dread. 53-year-old Heidi Noel hadn't heard from her daughter, Liese Dodd, in more than 15 hours. For most parents, that might not be cause for alarm, but Liese was 8 months pregnant. She was expecting a baby girl, affectionately nicknamed Baby Bean. She never went this long without answering her mother's calls. Something was wrong. Heidi drove to her daughter's small second-floor apartment on Bolivar Street. She let herself inside, calling her name. Silence. The kind of silence that makes the air heavy, suffocating. She walked down the hallway. The bedroom door was ajar. When she stepped inside, her world ended. Liese lay on the floor, her body motionless, her skin cold, and her head gone. For a moment, Heidi froze. She thought her mind was tricking her. She reached down, touched her daughter's arm, whispered her name. Then reality hit with crushing force. Staggering backwards, Heidi's scream tore through the walls of the apartment. She bolted outside, collapsing on the steps, trembling uncontrollably as neighbors stared. Her 911 call was raw and broken. The dispatcher's recording captured her grief in chilling clarity. "My daughter's killed. My daughter's head. It's gone." When police arrived minutes later, they found Heidi rocking back and forth, her face pale with shock. Inside, officers confirmed the nightmare. Liese's decapitated body lay in the bedroom. The weapon was gone. Her head was missing. A crime scene unlike any they had ever witnessed had just been discovered, and it was only the beginning. To understand the horror of this crime, you first need to know who was lost. Liese Dodd was born on August 14th, 1999, in Madison County, Illinois. From the very beginning, she was described as radiant, a girl with a wide smile and a heart that always seemed bigger than her small frame. At just 10 years old, when most kids were begging for toys or electronics, Liese made an unusual choice for her birthday. Instead of presents, she asked friends and family to donate to a local no-kill animal shelter. That moment defined her. Compassionate, selfless, someone who cared for the voiceless. As she grew up, she carried that same kindness everywhere she went. In high school, she was remembered as the girl who would notice when others felt left out. After graduation in 2017, she worked at Dairy Queen. Regular customers remembered her laughter at the drive-through window, her easy warmth that seemed to brighten even the dullest day. But Liese had bigger dreams. She was saving money to enter the medical field, hoping to follow in her mother's footsteps. She wanted a life built around helping people. By June of 2022, her focus had shifted to her greatest joy, her baby girl. At just 22, Liese was preparing to become a mother. She had chosen a name. Invitations for her baby shower had been mailed out the weekend before. She and her family called the baby Baby Bean. When police searched her apartment after the murder, they noticed a haunting detail. One of her hands rested on a pregnancy book. In her final moments, she had been reading about motherhood, dreaming of a future she would never see. Liese wasn't just a victim. She was a daughter, a friend, and almost a mother. Behind Liese's warm smile and hopeful plans was a relationship that had become a slow-burning feud. For nearly 2 years, she had been caught in an on-and-off cycle with Deundrea Holloway, a man her age whose presence in her life would prove catastrophic. At first, it seemed like any young romance, but those closest to Liese soon noticed the cracks. Holloway's life was unstable. He bounced between homes, struggled with unemployment, and battled drug use. At times, the couple even lived in a tent. Their relationship was volatile, and his temper was dangerous. At work, Lisa's boss at Dairy Queen began noticing signs of abuse. She came in with black eyes, bruises on her arms. At first, she brushed it off, claiming her dog had scratched her. Eventually, she broke down and admitted the truth. Deundrea had hit her. The abuse escalated. In July 2021, Lisa was hospitalized. Her nose was broken, both eyes swollen shut. A witness once saw Holloway punch her in the face in a car with no attempt to hide it. Yet after every incident, Lisa returned to him. Friends and family pleaded with her to leave. But like so many victims of domestic violence, she felt trapped by the cycle of fear, apologies, and false hope. By late 2021, she was texting her boss that her boyfriend had beaten her again. She admitted he had threatened to harm her and even her family. Still, she struggled to break away. Those who knew Holloway said his mental state was unraveling. He punched himself after fights, spiraled into rage, and sent disturbing messages about not knowing how to let out emotions without snapping. To outsiders, it was clear the relationship was toxic. To Lisa, it was complicated. Love, fear, and danger all tangled together. The final 48 hours of Liese Dodd's life were marked by unease, fear, and a series of decisions that would tragically lead her back into danger. On June 7th, 2022, Holloway suddenly disappeared. He didn't answer her texts, didn't come home. For most, it would have been a relief. For Lisa, 8 months pregnant and emotionally fragile, it felt like abandonment. She reached out to his relatives, desperate to know where he'd gone. That night, she texted her mother a haunting message. "I think I got left." To Heidi, this should have been freedom. Her daughter finally breaking free from a violent man. She tried to comfort Lisa, telling her that if Holloway was gone, it might be a blessing. But for Lisa, the thought of raising her child alone felt unbearable. In her despair, she confessed she had harmed herself, cutting her leg. She told Holloway she was just going to kill herself because she couldn't get it right. The next evening, June 8th, came what would be her final mistake. Security cameras at her apartment complex revealed Holloway had left with his uncle, Marty. Later that night, Marty called Liese, reassuring her that everything was fine, that he was bringing Holloway back. Despite her mother's warnings, Lisa drove out to meet them. At 9:11 p.m., CCTV captured her returning home with Holloway. She texted her mother one last time. "I'm trying to figure it out." Neighbors soon heard the front door creak open. Muffled voices, tension in the air. By 9:30 p.m., the sounds escalated into a violent argument. Then, chilling screams. By 9:45, the apartment walls trembled with forceful thuds, like wood being chopped. And then, silence. No one called the police. No one knew they had just heard the last moments of Lisa's life. What happened inside that second-floor apartment between 9:30 and 10 p.m. on June 8th was beyond anything neighbors or investigators could imagine. At first, it sounded like an argument. A neighbor described muffled yelling, the kind of domestic dispute they had sadly grown used to hearing from the couple upstairs. But then the voices shifted. Lisa's cries grew sharper, desperate, filled with pain. Moments later, the entire building shook. The neighbor recalled hearing 5 or 6 heavy blows. Not random banging, not a scuffle, but deliberate, powerful strikes. Each impact reverberated through the walls, so strong it rattled furniture. To the neighbor, it sounded like someone chopping wood. Methodical, forceful, requiring strength and rage. And then, nothing. The screams stopped. The shaking stopped. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the noise. Inside that room, 22-year-old Liese Dodd, 8 months pregnant, had been murdered. Her life, and the life of her unborn daughter, brutally stolen in a frenzy of violence. But Holloway's rage did not end with death. In an act so grotesque it would haunt detectives forever, he used a serrated knife to decapitate her. He severed her head from her body, leaving behind a scene of almost unimaginable horror. Investigators later described the bedroom as something they could never erase from memory. Blood stained the walls, the floor, the bed. Her body lay lifeless, one hand still resting on a pregnancy book. Her head was missing. And as the minutes ticked past midnight, Holloway was already plotting his next move. He would not run immediately. Instead, he lingered, changing his clothes, gathering items, and preparing to dispose of evidence. The nightmare was only beginning to unfold. After the violence, Holloway didn't flee in panic. He moved with a chilling sense of control. Around 11:57 p.m., security cameras outside the apartment building captured him leaving through the front door. He was no longer in the same clothes. His face was partially concealed. In his hands, he carried a white plastic laundry basket. To anyone passing by, it might have looked like an ordinary chore, but inside that basket was the severed head of Liese Dodd. The footage showed him walking calmly down the dark street, the basket cradled against his side. He didn't hurry. He didn't look around. He drifted into the shadows behind a nearby smoke shop, disappearing from view. Not long after, a dumpster in the area became the resting place for evidence of the crime. Inside, investigators later recovered a serrated knife, blood-stained men's and women's clothing, and the laundry basket itself, containing what was left of Liese's head. But Holloway wasn't done. 2 hours later, shortly after 2 a.m., Liese's black car vanished from the apartment lot. He drove the vehicle to his mother's house across town, arriving around 2:30 a.m. He pounded on the door until his sister let him in. She noticed the car immediately. Something about him seemed off, his demeanor anxious, restless. By morning, his behavior grew stranger. His half-sister PJ found him in the bathroom, cutting off his dreadlocks, something he hadn't touched in years. He claimed he wanted a fresh start. He stripped off the clothes he'd worn during the murder and tossed them into his mother's trash can outside. He handed his grandmother Liese's debit card, ID, and keys, spinning a weak lie that he had found them on the ground. The cover-up had begun. By the afternoon of June 9th, 2022, Holloway's fragile disguise was already unraveling. Liese's body had been discovered. Police were searching for her killer, and Holloway, instead of hiding, lingered in plain sight. He had abandoned Liese's car on a neighborhood street, a crude "for sale" sign taped inside the window, as if the vehicle could be quietly passed off and forgotten. But his own behavior betrayed him. Family members noticed his jittery movements, the constant fidgeting, the nervous pacing. He couldn't sit still. He couldn't keep his story straight. Why did he have Liese's belonging? Why had he cut off his dreadlocks? Why was he discarding clothing in bags of trash? By nightfall, Holloway was no longer at his mother's house. He wandered into Gillespie, Illinois, where police were investigating a petty bicycle theft. When officers stopped him, they had no idea who he really was. To them, he was just another drifter, disheveled and restless. But fingerprints told a different story. Within hours, detectives connected him to the brutal murder of Liese Dodd. The man in custody for stealing a bike was the same man last seen carrying a white laundry basket into the night. At the Gillespie police station, his behavior was bizarre, oscillating between silence and agitation. He paced the room, muttered to himself, and laughed at odd moments. At one point, he banged his head repeatedly against the wall, leaving officers unsettled. When Alton investigators arrived to confront him, Holloway refused even the most basic cooperation. He would not confirm his name. He claimed to be dissociated, and when questions pressed too close, he demanded a lawyer. The mask had slipped. The suspect was caught, but the legal battle was only beginning. The criminal proceedings against Deundrea Holloway began with a list of charges as brutal as the crime itself. 2 counts of first-degree murder, one for Liese, one for her unborn daughter, along with intentional homicide of an unborn child, concealment of a homicidal death, and vehicle-related offenses. His bond was set at $2 million. But from the start, the courtroom was not simply a place of justice. It was a theater of questions about Holloway's mind. Was he a calculating killer or a man crumbling under untreated mental illness? Twice, defense attorneys challenged his competency to stand trial. In September 2022, a judge ruled him mentally unfit, sending him to a state institution. There, he was evaluated and treated until February 2023, when doctors determined he had regained enough clarity to face the charges. The case soon drew the attention of the Illinois Supreme Court, which handed down a controversial ruling. Under state law, an unborn child could not be considered a separate victim for sentencing enhancements. It was a devastating blow to prosecutors who had hoped to seek a life sentence. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy. Jurors and spectators alike listened as prosecutors painted Holloway as violent, manipulative, and fully aware of his actions. They detailed the abuse Liese endured, the cycle of fear and reconciliation that trapped her, and the cold, calculated way Holloway tried to erase his crime. The defense countered with a narrative of unraveling mental health, citing years of instability, emotional struggles, and a system that failed to provide treatment. His stepfather described him as a human being, afflicted but not a monster. In the end, the trial wasn't about innocence. It was about punishment and whether justice could ever match the horror of what happened in that small Alton apartment. On January 17th, 2025, the courtroom fell silent as the sentence was delivered. After years of delays, competency hearings, and legal battles, Deundrea Holloway finally faced judgment. He had pleaded guilty just weeks earlier, sparing Liese's family the agony of a full trial. There would be no drawn-out testimonies, no gruesome photographs projected on courtroom screens, but the outcome remained devastating. The judge pronounced the sentence with grave weight, 60 years in prison. The breakdown was clear: 30 years for the murder of Liese Dodd, 20 years for the homicide of her unborn daughter, and 10 years for concealment of a homicidal death, each term to run consecutively. Under Illinois law, Holloway would not be eligible for release until serving at least 52 years. He will be in his 80s if he lives that long. For prosecutors, it was justice, though not the full measure they had hoped for. The ruling from the Illinois Supreme Court had eliminated the possibility of a life sentence. For the Dodd family, it was closure, but never peace. That day, Heidi Noel, Liese's mother, stood before the court. Her voice shook, but her words carried the weight of a broken life. On that night, I received a life sentence, she told the judge, to live the remainder of my life without my beautiful, loving, sassy daughter. Around the courtroom, people wept quietly. Others sat frozen, absorbing the horror once more. Holloway, shackled and silent, showed little reaction. The man who once paced, laughed, and raged in holding cells now sat still, expression unreadable, eyes downcast. The gavel fell. It was over. But for those who loved Liese, the true sentence was just beginning. A lifetime without her. The murder of Liese Dodd left scars far beyond one family. It shook an entire community. Alton's police chief called the crime abominable, beyond reprehensible. Local residents gathered for vigils, leaving flowers, candles, and messages of love outside her apartment. A GoFundMe raised nearly $16,000 to support the family, which Heidi later pledged to donate to domestic violence resources. In Liese's name, she wanted others to find safety where her daughter could not. But the pain never truly faded. Heidi spoke of her grief often, describing it as a weight she would carry forever. "I just wish she had known how loved she was," she said through tears. The case also highlighted broader failures: the lack of adequate mental health treatment for Holloway, the gaps in protecting victims of abuse, the tragic consequences of ignoring warning signs. For true crime observers, the story is chilling not just because of its brutality, but because of its familiarity. Every day, victims remain trapped in cycles of domestic violence. Every day, someone dismisses a threat until it's too late. Liese's final act, her hand resting on a book about pregnancy, was a symbol of who she was. A mother preparing for a future she would never live to see. Her life was cut short. Her child's never began. Yet her story endures, not as a tale of horror alone, but as a reminder that behind every statistic is a face. Behind every tragedy is a voice silenced too soon. And sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones already inside our homes. If this story moved you, share it so Liese's memory lives on and no victim's voice is silenced. Subscribe for more true crime documentaries where every detail uncovers the darkness and demands justice.